We are the Group 7 and we will be presenting the research Curriculum Design and Language Learning, an analysis of English textbooks in Brazil by Ellen Nogueira Rodrigues, published in 2015. So here are the parts of our report. I will be in charge of the introduction. Next would be Ms. De La Cruz for methodology, Ms. Karen for results, and Ms. Shekinah would be on the conclusions and recommendations. So here, in the introduction, which is the background of the study, some disciplines rely on text materials more than others. English language teaching, or the ELT, is one such discipline. Thus, textbooks are an effective tool for identifying stakeholders and teachers' beliefs and practices of language learning theories and course content in the foreign language classroom by Aklam, 1994, Rafinpour, and Hashmi, 2011, Roberts, 1996. So as we all know, textbook is a very important text material that we use as teacher for reference of the course content. Textbooks also help the students in the language learning process. Many textbook analyses have been conducted to understand how learning about culture, gender, genre, language, and skills are presented through textbooks. And other studies examine the underlying framework for teaching and learning the target language. So, communicative language teaching, or CLT, has become a predominant approach for language learning, where language is perceived as communication in the context used rather than grammatical forms to be learned, by Byram and Garcia, 2009, Littlewood in 1981. Because since 1980s, CLT has received a widespread attention in response to changes in thinking in the field of language teaching, was also from Bromfitt and Johnson, 1971. So in attempting to identify the characteristic features of English as a second language, or ESL, teaching in the 1990s through textbook blurbs. So when we say blurbs, these are the short description about the textbook. So Toveda, 1997, found that 75 of the blurbs identified grammar as the focus of language learning, and only 53% follow a communicative approach to language learning. So during this time, also in Brazil, similar textbook studies were specifically undertaken to identify the process of language learning and methodological framework in the text materials by Almeida Filho et al. In 1991. Studies of English as a second language teaching method suggest the prevalent use of the grammatical, translation, and audiolingualism methodological approach, not the principles of communicative approach, by Almeida Filho et al. 1991 and J. Santos 1993. So, textbook analysis in Brazil seems to highlight the production of genres in writing, demonstrating a remarkable emphasis on learning the production of writing over oral skills by the National Textbook Program. So the overemphasis on genre and writing might reduce the role of the communicative approach on the learning of the target language. With the current emphasis of the textbook analysis, little is known about the use of the current language curriculum design and language learning processes that underlies in the EFL textbooks used in Brazil. The textbook is the most important resource for EFL classrooms in Brazil. Therefore, it is necessary to understand the curriculum design employed in the textbook and language learning processes used based on communicative approach, which is the current and the favorable approach to English teaching. So the problem that exists is that the lack of studies on approaches used in the construction of the English textbook for EFL, and the need to identify to what extent communicative approaches guides and frames the curriculum content. The purpose of this study is to analyze two sixth grade Brazilian EFL textbooks, and this study specifically aims to identify the underlying methodological approach of these textbooks, observing to what extent textbook writers are taking into account language curriculum design. Next, analyze how language learning processes are being incorporated into the foreign language textbook. And next is to evaluate the textbook's strengths and weaknesses and indicating changes necessary for these textbooks. Justification of the research. The communicative approach advocates the language teaching for the purpose of enhancing students' communicative competence in real and authentic context. Even though the communicative and task-based approach are the current proposed frameworks for language teaching, but textbooks in countries where English is taught as a foreign language still follows a conventional structural syllabus which focuses on the grammar. Research also indicates that textbook designers are in the process of aligning communicative approach instructions. But there's also a scarcity of research that analyzes the content of foreign language textbooks in the language learning experiences evoked in the textbooks in Brazil. Furthermore, most studies in the area of language learning have focused on ESL rather than the context of EFL learning. So therefore, more precise indication of how language learning is conceived and language learning processes are organized can be achieved by the present study. So that ends my report. Thank you for listening.